All right, it is looking like we are live. What's up, y'all? My name is Amir Zen. I'm joined today by Jason Bassler, the co-founder of the Free Thought Project and founder of Police the Police. We are going to be having an epic discussion today about the meme wars, meme history, internet censorship, and me and Jason are going to tell you about the experiences that we've had in this world over the last decade plus. I'd say going into 2 decades, not over, almost. Jason, how you doing?
Good, brother. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I know we were planning on doing my podcast today and doing this back to back, but nevertheless, we're here. And yeah, it's nice to be on a live stream.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. We are just going to do some testing right now to see if we are good and streaming on every platform. We are live on Twitter. We are live on Rumble right now. We're live on YouTube. Perfect. And we are also live on Twitch. So if you're tuning into any of these platforms, please like this video, give us a follow, share it with your friends, and let's get this conversation started. Jason, as the co-founder of Free Thought Project, and I would say that you are one of the most prolific memers in the history of the internet. So it's a pleasure to have a meme king like yourself on to give insight on meme history and where it's gone from, say, 15 years ago to 10 years ago to today, and how it went from originally just being funny jokes to being something that can arguably topple governments. Jason,
sure, brother.
Let me know
Thank you, man.
about that.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a huge introduction there. I don't know if I quite fill up those boots, but I'm trying my best. And yeah, I have been in this game for a while, co-founder of the Free Thought Project, as you mentioned. And yeah, I'd like to think that we've got our memes out there, and we've had a effective impact on trying to I don't know, maybe wake up a few people's perspectives on reality. So yeah, man, God, there's so much to unpack with that. I mean, memes they're very powerful. It's basically a steroid for content. I mean, people don't really, I think, understand and embrace, and maybe even some people kind of look down on memes, maybe more of like the intellectuals, which is fine, but they've been a very effective strategy for at least us, for the Free Thought Project. And I would definitely argue kind of pushing the Overton window a little bit forward, as far as some of these liberty-based ideas and simple mottos and slogans like taxation is theft. And not even that. I mean, look at what happened with COVID. Look what's going on right now with the Israel Palestine war. It seems like there is, certainly an effect that we're having through this information war, through social media. And I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who could really make a coherent argument that memes haven't played a big part of that.
That is a fantastic point. And memes, and the reason I wanted to focus on memes and internet censorship today is because I feel like they go hand in hand. The rise of memes correlated directly with the rise of internet censorship. And from my own personal experience, say 15 years ago, we were sitting online and writing these long paragraphs about freedom and, trying to convert people over to the message of freedom, and sure. It seemed like, explaining taxation as theft in a 5-paragraph essay over a Free Thought Project meme was just not as efficient as the meme to getting the most amount of people over to specific ideas. So when did you start memeing first, and why did you start memeing?
Geez, it was probably around 2011 or so. It was right around the Occupy Wall Street movement. All of a sudden, I'm finding myself more and more on social media. If anybody's ever heard my origin story, I apologize, but it basically goes something like this. The iPad had just come out, and I'm a tech guy. I appreciate tech. And so I had this iPad with me wherever I was going, friends' houses, X, Y, and Z. I was there, work, lunchtime. Didn't matter. I was watching all these videos on YouTube. I was absorbing all this information. And I found myself more and more on Facebook and Tumblr. I know Tumblr's kind of an interesting one, but that was kind of where my roots originated from. And I found this momentum. I felt like I was accomplishing more by spreading information online with these memes that I was finding than I was standing out on the street with a sign. During that time, I was interested in the Ron Paul campaign. I was doing banner hangs. I was trying to do everything I could promote. I was doing tabling, stuff like that. Real world outreach is great, but the online presence seemed like it was much more effective, much more efficient. I could really tailor and sculpt a message that seemed to resonate with at least the people who were following me at that time. And it's evolved so much, obviously, over the years. And it's interesting to see where it came. But when I first started, it was very raw. It was very rudimentary. Memes didn't really have a lot of templates back then. It was just like some impact font. It could be like a handful of words. And it could be something that really just provoked a thought. It would be something that generated some type of new epiphany, I guess, in people's heads. And the beauty of a meme, I would say, is that, once you see it, you can't unsee it necessarily. So, to your point, instead of handing somebody a novel or asking them to read this article, you could just share a meme on your wall, and your family, friends, coworkers, associates, everybody's going to have to see this. And in one way or another, kind of deal with the inner turmoil of trying to unpack and deal with either their cognitive dissonance, or trying to maybe logically assess the meme and try to understand what it's trying to convey. So in a way, it's kind of like guerrilla journalism, guerrilla activism, because although, we're not like standing in the streets and maybe cornering politicians, which was a popular tactic for a while, we are injecting concepts and information, counterintuitive information and ideologies to a certain degree into people's consciousness without their permission. So in that sense, I think it's been a very effective tool. And again, it's something you either have to deal with or ignore. But if you try to ignore it, it's still going to be in the back of your head, and it's going to be kind of that monkey on your back that meme that haunts you, and I feel like those are probably the most effective memes, the ones that really try to get people to challenge their own beliefs and worldviews.
Indeed. I just want to go back a little. You brought up two words. You said banner hangs, and that's one of the first things you were doing when you were getting involved in your activism. Sure. Yeah. If you don't know what banner hangs are, I don't know if you're not into that activist world, right? What are banner hangs, Jason? Because I used to do that kind of stuff too back in those exact years.
Dude, I know you were living in LA around the same time I was, so there's a chance that you were driving through Hollywood and, right off the 101, you happened to see this huge banner saying, vote Ron Paul in 2012. And we had a bunch of other stuff. Turn off your TV, think for yourself. It was with We Are Change Hollywood. And I think it wasn't just the Ron Paul message that we were trying to convey, because in that time it was very exciting. Everybody was kind of waking up and new to this information. We were trying to inject a bunch of different things with those banner hangs.
I just had a wild realization, Jason. Back in those years, I was part of the Ron Paul campaign in California, and we were wondering who these other people are who were doing these banner hangs. And awesome. Now I just put it all together, because we thought, that it was direct kind of our group of people were the only ones really doing this. And then we started seeing these other ones popping up around Los Angeles and Southern California. And we never really knew. I didn't know you back then. We didn't know each other back then, but we were in the same areas. And so, it's awesome to see the power of that decentralized activism that we were all doing, where we're promoting these very similar messages in the same city, and we didn't even know each other at that time.
Well, I was going to also mention, Amir, I think we both realized maybe about, 6 months ago when we were talking offline, and of course, you're no slouch yourself. You actually went, or excuse me, let me start over. I actually went to a Ron Paul event that you were part of hosting, I believe, at UCLA in 2012. And we didn't realize that until later. And man, that event was crazy. I think, in fact, you guys had to switch venues to the tennis courts because so many people were interested in it. And I remember walking out of there, and there's people hanging from the trees and like people just everywhere because everybody wanted to get a glimpse of Ron Paul and hear what he had to say.
That was, yeah, there were, when there are so many pictures from that night. So when you look at the pictures from the crowd, you just start seeing so many people that are still active today in that crowd at UCLA. And to the point you were bringing up, originally, because I had graduated from UCLA recently at that time, and I was at the headquarters in Venice, the Ron Paul headquarters in Venice, and just had the idea of, Ron Paul's going to all these campuses. It would be pretty wild if we brought him to Los Angeles, a Democratic stronghold. And, the campaign told us if we get a certain amount of signatures, then he'll come. I remember being at UCLA with a group of other people just tabling to get signatures for Ron Paul. And then this is the wild part about that event is that when they gave us the notice, it was like, I think 2 weeks, it must have been a few weeks notice for, hey, we're coming on this date very soon. And that's the wild thing about how many people were there. It's not like we were sitting there promoting the event for 6 months. It was a very short amount of time, to the point where in that short amount of time, so many people wanted to come that we had to switch venues into the bigger tennis court area. It was going to be in the track area across from the tennis court, and then they had to open up the entire tennis court. And even still, the point that you just brought up, there were so many people that they couldn't safely let every person inside. There were so many people standing outside of the fences that people started climbing those trees. And there are these famous photos that we see from that night, the trees of liberty, and the people up there with their Ron Paul signs.
There was so much energy in those days, man. And, that's part of the reason why I do support the Mises Caucus, although, everybody has their mixed feelings about it, I guess, at this point. But it really did try to recapture that energy from the Ron Paul era there. And, man, there was just so much excitement, like Ron was up on stage during the debates and just telling everybody what they didn't want to hear and challenging the neocons. And it was great, man. Like I've never felt more like a cheerleader for a politician in my life. And I don't think I've ever supported another politician in my life. So maybe, maybe a bit slanted in that, but yeah. And it's funny to your point as well. When I was living in LA, I felt like I was alienated. I couldn't really find anybody who was part of my tribe. But oddly enough, when we're at our peak with the Free Thought Project, when we look at analytics, like the majority of our audiences were coming from LA and New York. And, these are obviously the two biggest cities in the United States, and I guess it makes sense as far as population wise, and maybe translates to having more libertarians just because they have higher populations. But I never knew where they were at. I couldn't find them. And we always think of these cities as being more like Democrat or, liberal run and whatnot. Not to say that they aren't as far as the government, but there are more of us out there than we realize. And I think that's an important point to kind of note.
Yeah, organizing and feeling just seen in general in Los Angeles is extremely difficult, as it's just the population's so big, it's spread out between so many different areas. If you live in one area of Los Angeles, you're probably not going to be traveling to the other area. I was on the west side for those years, and I rarely traveled to the other side of 405. You kind of stay in. There's no reason to go to Hollywood unless I'm going to an event or something. Unless there's a reason to leave your neighborhood in Los Angeles, you're probably not going to leave because it's a nightmare going anywhere in Los Angeles. So if you've lived there, that you generally for efficiency reasons, set up your life in your local area so
Most
you
definitely.
don't have to take 1 hour to drive to Pasadena, then another hour to Culver City, then another hour to Redondo Beach, then another 2 hours up to the valley, you know, and then you're all still in Los Angeles, right? So
People are religious about that too. You're like, hey, I'm in town, like come visit. I'm like, nah, like I'm sorry, like you have to come over here. And like, wait, what? Like, can't you just drive like an hour? I'm like, no, too much traffic, too much bullshit. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on with that.
it's the whole you know, they really care about you if they say they'll pick you up from LAX. If they trek through Los Angeles, if you have a homie that'll come pick you up themselves, that is an act of love in Los Angeles. That's one of the greatest acts of love you can show somebody in Los Angeles, right?
I think that's where me and Luke Radowski's bromance kind of separated and went different ways. To be completely honest, not to be too intimate here with our audience, but yeah, man, no, exactly. I've let's say I've lost a couple friends just because of that, and trust me, it's a pain in the ass. I've actually been pulled over by the airport police just for going like 5 miles over, and maybe even it wasn't. Maybe it was just being profiled or something. But yeah, that airport is a nightmare, 100%.
I too have been pulled over by airport police as well, and it is not a pleasurable experience. So already you've made this drive to get to LAX. You're already stressed out. You've had to drive through chaos. And then right when you get there, then the government decides to give you the real fun, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, yeah, usually that's how it works.
And you know, I wanted to mention about Free Thought Project and the demographics that you were targeting. I remember before the reckoning that happened when the whoever's, we'll go into more detail about that, came after Free Thought Project and a handful of other independent media, not just your companies, but individually as well. You know, but the point is that back then, before that hammer came down, I personally saw so many of my left-leaning friends, actually, even to this day, when I look at a lot of my left-leaning friends, they're still following Free Thought Project today, which surprises me often when I see it. But back then, I remember it was Free Thought Project, the anti-media, these kinds of companies. You all were really pushing for a nonpartisan standard. And as a result, it was actually working out. Like, y'all did a really good job of not being biased in your reporting. And
Sure.
as a result, we saw these sides coming together. Same with that Ron Paul event at UCLA. So many of my liberal friends who are liberals to this day were at that event, and still to this day, they'll bring it up that they had a great time at that event.
Sure. Yeah, we took a lot of pride, and I guess we still do to a certain extent, kind of blurring the lines there because, you know, we can be ideologically driven at times, you know, and we can be kind of blinded by our bias. And we always wanted to make sure that the information came first and foremost. So we tried not to use divisive language or specifically try to address or call out certain ideologies, which, you know, of course, like I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. I don't believe in the initiation of violence. I don't believe in monopolies of government or law enforcement. So, but I don't feel like there's a lot of benefit or utility to really always focusing on that divide. So I think, yeah, us and the anti-media who you mentioned, we were kind of always strategic about how we introduced and rolled out information to not try to amplify that divide, but rather try to amplify the focus on the true enemy, which is the state, you know. And so, yeah, I feel like muddying those waters was successful because people didn't know if we were leftists, if we were right, if we were moderates or centrists, you know. So it worked out perfectly, but we were always consistent in the messaging. And I think that was kind of important because, you know, somebody could hear what I'm saying right now and assume that, well, that's easy to play both sides. You know, you're just kind of cherry picking information and catering information to your echo chamber, but that's not necessarily it. We were always consistent with the non-violence, more non-initiation of violence message, peace, prosperity, of course, accountability, freedom. These were our biases with the Free Thought Project, and we are straight up and we were straightforward about that. People always seem to make this point, especially kind of the newbies and the centrists who come in, that, well, they want objective information. They want non-biased information. It doesn't exist. I'm sorry. I hate to break it to you. All information, all exchange of information is going to have some type of bias to it. So we were straight up. We were out front about it. We said, hey, look, this is our bias. We are for freedom. We are for accountability. We are for peace. But we're not going to also ride that wave of divide that I think a lot of people have, especially when the Trump year started to kind of approach us. It was like, how can we divide ourselves even further by, throwing commies out of helicopters or whatever? And obviously there's, it's a little funny and we could joke around about that. But like, I think there's more power to us kind of looking at the state as our mutual enemy. And when it comes down to it, a lot of what we disagree on with the left and the woke and the commies is just our economic preferences and the individualism versus collectivism, and obviously that's a pretty big divide, that last one. But I think there's a lot of value that we could ascertain if we maybe focused on more of the similarities as to, how we strategically approach our opponent rather than constantly focusing on the divide. And of course, again, that it makes fun memes. It gets you some quick followers, but I think at the end of the day, it depends on what your incentive and what your objective is doing this. And for us, it wasn't just to get followers or get our face and name, some kind of bigger micro niche celebrity or something, that was never the point. The point was to try to advocate for peace, for liberty, and for accountability.
And as a result of doing that prior to, the algorithm wars and the algorithm becoming just a professional at authoritarianism, which arguably it wasn't as good of doing 10 years ago. Internet censorship was happening, in Ron Paul 2008 campaign on the internet, but it just wasn't as evolved as when, and even back when they first came after you and Free Thought Project, even from then to now, the systems have become even more evolved. So do you want to, can you bring up that moment that happened with Free Thought Project and how eventually, what you're saying here, you're focusing on freedom, no dividing, or you minimizing divide and conquer as much as possible. And then I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but online companies like independent media companies like the Free Thought Project were starting to get to a place where your reach was surpassing mainstream media. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh yeah, we were smoking the mainstream media 100%. And I have all the screenshots. I know it's going to sound a little outlandish when I share some of these numbers, but yeah, it was upwards of 50 to 70 million a week reach. 40,000, we're hauling in 40,000, 30,000 new followers a week. We were very
100% organic, no paid ads, none of this stuff, right?
None of it. No, 2017, we almost had 1 billion video views, almost 1 billion. I think it was around like 875,000.
In 2017, y'all. So, in 2023, it's a lot easier to get 1 billion video views than it was 6 years ago.
Yes and no. I guess it depends on, what topics you're talking about, because as you just mentioned, the censorship regime has amplified and certainly increased their presence and refined their strategies. And, that's not even a conspiracy theory anymore. And when it happened to us, and I guess I should probably just go over this, in October 11th, 2018, what's become known as the Purge, we were deplatformed by Facebook and Twitter within hours of each other, resulting in a loss of nearly 6 million fans. And we were one of 800 pages and accounts that suffered the same consequence. And I found out about it because I had just got out of the shower and I was checking the news, and I see an article from the LA Times that said 800 pages have been, removed from Facebook for possible Russian interference, Russian collusion. They had a bunch of different excuses, but And I was like, wait a second, what? And so I refreshed our page. I went to Facebook, refreshed our page, and sure enough, there was that banner at the top saying our page had been unpublished. I went to
Oh
Police
my
the
God.
Police. Police the Police was also reaching huge numbers. It was 1.9 million followers. It was the largest police accountability conversation happening anywhere on the internet at that time. And it was a very active page. We were producing content on a daily basis. That got nuked, and we went to Twitter.
I can confirm that too. Back in those days, your organization was essentially the viral. Today on YouTube, you find a bunch of different people who are doing that police the police kind of stuff. But back then, it was pretty much
community.
you. There were a few other people back then, but
Yeah.
As far as like the most mainstream, it was you. Arguably.
Yeah, I mean, I launched Police the Police in 2012, so that's pre Black Lives Matter. There was only a couple of other organizations. Cop Block was one that was a big influence for me because they were more libertarian, ideologically driven. So that seemed to resonate with me as I got more and more invested in the Ron Paul world. Of course, there was kind of like left-based cop watch units, kind of decentralized all throughout the country. Pretty small presence on social media, but they were significant. But yeah, so that played a big part for me. And yeah, as you mentioned, man, this was prior to George Floyd. I mean, I've been doing this forever, for a long time now, and the conversation has certainly changed, and almost to a certain extent, it's been vilified, especially by like the right. So it's harder to kind of have that conversation, and unfortunately, to a certain degree, it's dominated by people who don't look like me, and I've been kind of pushed out of it because I'm not a Black person within Black Lives Matter, so I'm still doing it. I'm just not as active and frequently posting and creating content and stuff. I just don't have the time, honestly, but it is still something I'm very passionate about. But back to what we were talking about as far as the purge and everything. So, obviously now, let me back up. Then we were obviously like, okay, something's up. Within 2 hours of each other, we were nuked on Facebook, we were nuked on Twitter. So that doesn't seem right. There's some kind of collusion there, right? I think
Facebook and Twitter. So if you're listening to this right now, pay attention to what he's about to say in regards to collusion, because this was a one swoop kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So we've now learned through the Twitter files and the Facebook files, which have come out even more recently, that this was all orchestrated by a government think tank called the Atlantic Council, who is in bed with the worst of the worst. I mean, the U.S. Army, Big Pharma, HSBC Group. I mean, I could go down like Google, so many of these nefarious actors. And so they had this arm of the Atlantic Council called the Digital Forensic Research Lab that more or less was the premise, the basis for targeting us. They were the ones who wrote the policy. They were the ones who kind of helped sculpt the moderation policies for Facebook, while also pointing a finger saying that we were colluding with the Russian government. And they gave us a handful. It was like it was like 3 or 4 pronged excuse. They said we were engaging with fake accounts. They said we were engaging in inauthentic coordinated behavior. And then spam, of course, and the spam one is just kind of like this catch-all umbrella term, which to me used to mean like you're spamming like one comment after another, but spam has become this interchangeable term for social media. That's basically anything they don't like. They could, put the banhammer down and say it's spam. But so now we Matt Taibbi, a bunch of other people, Musk released the Twitter files. We've even had this gentleman named Mike Benz, who is blowing up on Twitter right now, who's an ex-U.S. State Department employee who has been very vocal, coming out as a whistleblower, basically confirming literally everything that we suspected back in 2018, saying, look, these guys knew there was a presence here. They understood how effective that you guys were, and they realized that you were capacity building, and they had to more or less reduce you to smoldering embers, and that's a very common tactic that they use with insurgency groups. And they don't completely remove the terrorist insurgency group. They let the smallest kind of embers burn, so it doesn't feel like it's completely eradicated, but it's ineffective, essentially. So there's the way that this guy spelled out everything, and he continues to talk, and he continues to do a bunch of big interviews. Like, he's literally filling in all the blanks that we suspected and confirming everything that we knew.
And so these systems, we're talking about the history of this and how it evolved over these years. My analysis of it is that when that blanket attack came after you and so many other people across different platforms, and it's not just Facebook and Twitter, it was like a bunch of different other organizations too, some completely unrelated, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah,
these systems that they essentially got to test out and practice on people like you, then after the 2020 election and during the lockdowns and those things, they really got to push it to the next level. And, when we saw people like Andrew Tate, when they went after him, for example, when I looked at that, I was like, wow, y'all had years of practice on homies like Jason to perfect this system. However, you just brought something up, the smoldering embers. They think that that's actually what they succeed in doing, but in reality, bringing up Andrew Tate is bigger than ever still. Yourself, you still have a big and growing following. It's not the same as it was before, but they clearly didn't succeed in what they thought would be enough to get us to be like, all right, I'm done. I'm out of the trenches. Peace out. Instead, that did arguably work on a specific group of people, but for other people, it just got you fired up and to keep the fight going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It lit my fire, man. Absolutely. And to this day, I'm exhausted. I'm battle torn. I'm I'm having a hard time continuing justifying doing this full time, but I'm not going to stop. And that was part of it. It's like, no, you can't stop me, motherfucker. Like, I'm going to keep going regardless. And just the idea that they can slow down the free flow of information exchange. I mean, it's completely delusional. And it actually reminds me of an interview we just did yesterday with this woman named Jessica Solche, who is the director of this documentary that just came out called Death Athletic, which details the 3D printing gun community and kind of that subculture, and more specifically focuses on Cody Wilson, who's like the pioneer behind that movement. And the government has come after them so strong. Not only the federal government, but individual AGs from different states have sued Defense Distributed, his organization. And they have this idea that they could actually stop the free flow of information. Like, they could actually eradicate these files from being on the internet. It's like, no, you can't stop the signal. I'm sorry. Like, these files were downloaded 1 million times 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Do you really think you're going to be able to stop this? Like, so these people are absolutely delusional, but the point of the movie was more or less kind of focusing on the fact that government is impotent, that it is archaic, that it doesn't have the mechanisms to actually stop this stuff. And when it came to brass tacks, and when Cody actually sued these people back, it came to the conclusion that a lot of the bureaucrats and politicians who were gung-ho about stopping this didn't really have any answers as to how to stop the free flow of these files and information, because ultimately it's a First Amendment issue. So yeah, man, a whole industry has popped up, with these fact checkers. And this is all something that has been very strategically implemented throughout the years. And as you're mentioning, it wasn't something that they were just testing out on us. It was something they were doing to silence people like us who had enormous reaches, so they could roll out stuff like the COVID narrative. And it was a preemptive strike. It was a preemptive action. So these fact-checking industries, it's not here for your safety. That's always the veneer, that's always the pretty language that they associate these things to, but it's more or less to control the flow of information. And that's effectively what they've done. They've put a pretty face on turning down our volume, throttling our information. and saying it's because we have to protect the public, you know? So that's probably one of our biggest enemies right now. But the good news is nobody takes these fact checkers seriously. In fact, most people get even more interested because anytime there is some type of warning label or fact check, people are more likely and more apt to actually click it. And that actually speaks to the Streisand effect. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but I could give a quick few minutes on that.
Please,
but
yeah.
So Barbara Streisand back in the day had a house on the coast, and there was a photographer who took some aerial shots of her house. And so Streisand, he was in a jet or whatever, and took a few pictures.
Barbara Streisand, for anybody who doesn't is younger, was a very famous actress back when we were younger, right?
Yeah, and a musician, I believe. I think she sang, had quite a few albums and stuff. My mom loved her. I don't know.
Yeah, musician. Yeah, so I was like, I don't even. Yeah.
Anyway, she sued this photographer, and the case ended up blowing up. And like the picture was only viewed something like 5,000 times beforehand, and then after the case, it was viewed like 100,000 times. You know, so it ended up backfiring on her, and that's exactly what censorship does almost every single time it happens. You know, so I don't even remember where we started with this, but there's a rant for you and your audience.
Yeah, and it's essentially the unintended consequences, the Streisand effect. It's the blowback effect of putting attention on something. If you just didn't put attention, 5,000 people, it would have stopped right there. The fact that you made a big deal out of it, now we want, like, it's like on Instagram where it says, this post is blocked, CY, and then see the post. You're like, dude, that's going to make me want to do it even more now, you know? Exactly. And it's interesting to note, too, that while personally I've been affected by political censorship, the thing that's hit me the hardest the last 5 or 6 years was health censorship. And with my company Specker and cannabis, doing CBD, I was doing THC before that, which is even more of a taboo on social media. And, I didn't get my PayPal account removed for anything political. I said it was for a non-toxic, super healthy compound. And so it's so interesting that I didn't really recognize how deep it was in the health world. And around the same time you were getting hit with Free Thought Project was when I started Specker. And I started immediately the first year because I was like, oh man, it's CBD. It's legal now. The federal government approved it. It's going to be all good. I can actually have a business that, and then you start the company and it's just like blocked, censored. You posted CBD hashtag, your account's gone, So it was a mind-blowing realization to me that, wow, I've said the most extreme political things sometimes, and I don't get censored, but I hashtag CBD once and they block me. What? So it just got me realize. And then, like, you were saying it was kind of like it was the prequel to what they did during the lockdowns. For me, then I saw it in a very similar way, because as soon as the lockdowns happened and they started banning all the information, the way I looked at it was that even things like ivermectin was the psyop. Because in reality, compounds like CBD in the research and other cannabinoids were showing that they would work better. And in research has shown that they work superior to really other things like, I would say, synthetic pharmaceuticals like ivermectin. But that conversation was completely pushed out. If you were bringing up the endocannabinoid system, THC, CBD, in regards to medicine during that era, the government was actually coming after, the FDA was coming after companies that were branding their products to help with COVID. And I never did that. I never said, take my products for COVID, but I was putting out education that was showing this is the endocannabinoid system. This is the target. This is how COVID works. This is how cannabinoids work. And again, that's the most censored I'd had ever been by doing that kind of health stuff. So it shows that it's so expansive. And the point is, no matter what truth you're talking about, if it's too true, they're gonna come after you using this similar blanket system, where I'd be wondering, like, are these people colluding with each other? How did the payment processor and this and it's frustrating internally, because back then thinking like, it can't be that bad. Like, I don't actually live in a full authoritarian country that uses the same exact systems as what I would hear that people use in, say, Iran. And they're using those systems here. It can't be as bad, you're like, you have to, like, you're telling. And then when the Twitter files came out with Matt Taibbi and the other journalists, and it just showed the exact emails, the exact programs, the exact algorithms, and you're like, damn, man, they actually are treating us on this level of censorship in the same way that in school, when we were younger, we learned about, the Soviet Union and how much into censorship they were, and all these different systems that they use to control their people. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is exactly what they're doing here to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. And, we are in a fifth generation warfare here. I don't think there's enough people who actually realize that. And I think it's easy to say, well, this is a psyop, this is a false flag. And we kind of paint that broad brush, or use that broad brush stroke or whatever. But it is happening. It is happening. And it is something that's highly coordinated. We see these types of, I think once a year, there's like the Bilderberg meeting and meetings like that, of like these high level organized meetups with, these upper echelon types of elite types of individuals, from corporations, from the banking world, from government, and they're all coming together to have conversations. And of course, the mainstream media never talks about that kind of stuff. And, we're not supposed to know about it. It's supposed to be a big secret. But I mean, what do you think's going on? What do you think they're talking about? What do you think are happening behind these closed doors? I mean, if you had, a slice of control over this $1 trillion machine known as the federal government and monopoly on law, you're going to do everything you can to try to organize behind the scenes with your friends and your cronies to make sure that you're using that instrument, that tool, to your best advantage. It only makes sense. So the idea that, this isn't happening, I think people are still a little bit naive about that. And I mean, we even covered an article not too long ago, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months ago now, about the U.S. Army PSYOP. I mean, there's actual, divisions within the U.S. Army that are PSYOP divisions.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that? That one girl that's like in the PSYOP division, and she's on social media and she just posts all the time, and she straight up says she's in the PSYOP division of the military, and she's posting these thirst traps, and it's like, they don't even have to hide it anymore, essentially.
Sure. But, I don't know, that then you come to this conclusion a lot of times where it's like, no, you have like a tinfoil hat on, like you're just a conspiracy theorist because you think that there's all this collusion going on in the background. And, to your point earlier, you said like the most kind of like extreme language, or maybe it's most like the most politically directed language, tends to be the most targeted. And I would agree to an extent, but it's also the flip side of that. It's also like very arbitrary language. Like there's also normies who are getting kind of caught up in this, where it's like these algorithms and AI, it's just misinterpreting the nuance of the conversation. And then guess what? Like they get hit with a ban, like they can't post for, 30 days or whatever it is nowadays on Facebook. And so it's kind of like this messy, I don't know, very blunt blunt tool that doesn't really like slice it. It's just more kind of, it doesn't have any precision or accuracy, it's like, and so to a certain extent, it makes it very challenging because it's like unpredictable. But yeah, we still know that there's certain words and certain phrases that we can't use that are too taboo. But then as you were experiencing, like that could expand to a whole different niche of life, including like health. And some product like CBDCs, like CBD, and
every time I see one of your posts, Jason, that says CBDC, I first have to be like, wait, no, wrong, different thing.
Sure. So, I mean, it's hard to know how much collusion there really is behind the scenes with these big industries and these big tech companies, and what ultimately the government's controlling, because we know now, from various different ways, not only this the Twitter files, but I mean, they even admitted it. Jen Psaki admitted that they were directing some of the COVID moderation policies for Facebook. I mean, again, yeah, they're just saying this stuff straight up. So it's definitely happening. It's definitely happening. And I think we shouldn't be so naive to think that, well, I don't know, maybe it was just an accident, or they're not colluding. Like, they're absolutely 100% trying to control the free flow of information on these social media platforms.
Yeah, I think Americans, it's the mindset that a group of people are sitting around at a table and discussing exactly this. And the answer is yes. They're exactly that. They're sitting in meetings regularly and deciding exactly how those standards are going to work. That's what we saw in the Twitter files with the Twitter trust and safety. That department is literally a conspiracy to control free speech. And it wasn't, and we say it's a conspiracy, and it's not a theory. The Twitter files showed that they're actually doing it. It's a conspiracy fact. That's the definition of what a conspiracy is.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's digital book burning. I mean, that's basically where we're at. And again, there's just this kind of ignorance, like this very strange ignorance. And I was kind of surprised, when Twitter and Facebook both took us down on the same day, that there wasn't more of noise about that, because even that alone seems strange. Like, don't get me wrong.
And sorry, before you continue, you're bringing up Twitter and Facebook. What were the other companies that came after you and some of the other people in the independent media? Because I know it wasn't just social media, right?
At that time, I don't know if like the PayPal stuff had already began, but we did also get a YouTube strike on that same day as well. So yeah, Google was probably in on it. Oddly, the strike was removed just a couple of days later, so we didn't like really spend too much time focusing on that. But it was like bing, 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 and there was so much going on in a 24-hour period of time that it was kind of hard to really assess the situation. But it did seem like YouTube was also somehow involved with the coordinated effort, although they didn't take down our channel outright like Twitter and Facebook did. But what I was getting at was basically Alex Jones. Like, we knew he was coming. We knew he was going to be deplatformed, and he was, and it was a slow process. I think it was like I think it was like Facebook at first, and then eventually Twitter ended up banning him. But we predicted it. We said, okay, we're going to be next. Like, we know this is going to happen. In fact, if you go on the Free Thought Project, we even wrote an article about it. We said, we're going to be next. This is for sure, what is going to be happening. And yeah, we were absolutely right. Like, we called it, and should have had a bigger point that I was leading up to with this, but nonetheless, that's a little, I guess, kind of caveat to the whole story.
Awesome. Yeah, it was, I see the transition that's happening right now. This is why I'm focusing so much on organizations like X and Rumble, just focusing on the actions speak louder than words organizations right now, where at least in the last year or so, companies like X and Rumble have proven that they will stand up for certain creators when everybody else goes after them. We saw that happen with Russell Brand, for example.
Right.
Tucker Carlson, has a show on X now. But what I see happening, and actually this is a bit concerning to me, Jason, and I want to know what you think about this, is that whenever things do start getting a little too free and prosperous and evolving, like we're seeing in the environment right now, again on social media, and I feel like that's why the excitement is up again, because we're free to talk about all the topics. Now I'm like, wow, I can just go on Twitter and talk about vaccines, abolishing the state, cannabinoids, curing disease, and not have to worry as much. But that being said, from the experiences that we have, it seems like those people that collude then come up with a Hail Mary that just comes and crashes down on people. I think that we can eventually get past that, but Jason, what do you think is going to be kind of occurring over the next few years, especially going into election season? Because you know things usually get pretty fiery during election times.
Sure. I mean, personally, I'm having a hard time really trusting even Elon, with some of his rhetoric. It's been a fun ride, and I love that he released the Twitter files. I can't say he's a free speech absolutist. That seems a little disingenuous and inaccurate.
Yeah.
But it is much better than it once was, and I have to admit that much. Now, people are still getting banned on Twitter, of course.
Yeah, Alex Jones still doesn't have his Twitter.
Correct. Yeah, and I think it's making strides in the right direction. Like the community notes, that's a great feature. They have the jury system.
Notes.
They have the jury system on Minds, which I really like as well. And it basically just a certain piece of content that is questionable, it will gather like a group of like 20 people and get their opinion on it, which is kind of cool. I don't know what kind of coding and digital infrastructure you'd need for something like that, but that seems like a great way of kind of moving forward with some of these problems, because it's true, misinformation does exist. Of course, I don't think it's as huge of a problem as the establishment wants us to believe, but it does exist. And the community notes, as far as I could tell, are starting to get abused a little bit, but still are kind of holding true to what their original intention what it was placed there for. So, as far as where we're going, man, I mean, I know you were talking about Rumble. I know there's a lot of people having a lot of luck on Rumble right now. And as you were saying, it seems that's one opportunity to at least monetize, which is a big part of this. They've taken, and I think this is part of the strategy as well, as along with the censorship industry that's kind of popped up, is not only do they demoralize us, but they've made it completely impossible to financially stay afloat doing this type of work. So before, we used to, I would say 95% of our revenue, which also employed 7 different writers. I want to make sure your audience understands that we had a full team here. This was 7 different writers, all diverse backgrounds, very educated.
They shut down your by this move that they made. They essentially shut down the daily of your company, and essentially what you had left over was bare bones to kind of build from there again. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So the ad revenue was a huge part of that for us. And now Google and Facebook own like 55% of that, the ad revenue, the ad market, So this has been a very strategic implementation of kind of a takeover. And I would say, and I'll try to be humble here, we were really challenging the mainstream news regime with our pages, and with our reach, with our narratives. And it makes sense why there was such a coordinated effort. And of course, it wasn't just us, but there was quite a few of us that were kind of holding this line and had a lot of momentum. And, you would go to Facebook and you'd see the mainstream, CBS, ABC, CNN, you go to their pages and they were dead. Their posts were dead. Their videos had no comments, no shares. You go to ours, they were thriving, man. People were hungry for this information. And now it's completely flipped on at its head, and they're gaming the algorithms. They're boosting content for these legacy media companies, and the game is rigged. So to a certain degree, I feel like if we're going to play the game with the big tech, the mainstream big tech companies, just know it's something that's temporary. Do not place all your eggs into one basket. Diversify as much as possible. And count your blessings every day that you're playing the game, because as we were saying earlier, the algorithms and AI, it can't distinguish nuance. And it could be something as benign as a simple sarcastic, post that you make that gets misinterpreted by the AI, and boom, there you go. You're gone for a week and your business suffers, Yep. So it's a very challenging time. And they're basically playing whack-a-mole right now with people like us, trying to keep us kind of silent. But again, that's never going to work. But you do have to be mindful. You do have to be smart and strategic as to where you invest your time and your energy, and make sure you're getting that return on investment, because they're trying harder and harder to turn our volume down for people like us.
Yeah. And, to the point of this censorship, going back into memes, what I personally notice, I think you notice the same, is that the best way to continue getting around this censorship is a single meme image, as that is the hardest thing to block, and it's the thing that most efficiently can spread the fastest, to be shared the easiest, and not have every single word that would get blocked. When we make our memes, oftentimes we know that they have AI that goes through the meme, it checks it. So, you want to make sure you're doing the right words, but still getting your message across. And that's why I think memes are so important. And I mean, it's not just guys like me and you making memes anymore. We see governments now using memes, corporations using memes as just marketing campaigns, right? It's not like they're making good memes, but they're trying because they recognize the power that it has,
Sure.
and even for places like these countries like Iran, Israel, I see them memeing, and it's like, yeah, you can you're circumventing to get yourselves heard, because that's going to get a lot of reach comparatively to other methods. If they're like a live stream, they could just come and cut the live stream,
Sure,
cut your channel right there. But once that meme is out, it's the same thing about the 3D printed gun programs. Once the programs are out, they're out. Once the meme is out, it's out. That's why it's really awesome to see, like a Free Thought Project meme from say 2014 or something, just
still floating around,
being recycled
in the wild
online, on social media. And it's like, from people who probably don't know who you are or Free Thought Project is as well, and it's still got to them somehow.
Sure, man. Yeah, exactly. And you said something there that I think is kind of important, and I think I'm just going to take a second to speak on this, because it is easy to kind of feel intimidated by all this and to self-censor, right? And you're trying to choose the certain words that you think aren't going to get you flagged and get your account banned and stuff. But we always got to make sure we're walking that line, that we're still being authentic and we're still being effective with our messaging and our wording, So don't self-censor, guys, because ultimately that's what they want us to do. And it is more than that. I think it's more than that. I think they want us to feel defeated. They want to demoralize us. They want us to feel like we're not getting anywhere. And I have to struggle with this on in my own mind a lot of times, because I have been, it has been a very rough road since the purge. But I think this is all part of the psyop. And I think this is all part of the intentional manipulation to try to win this 5th generation war. And it makes sense, right? Demoralize your opponent, make them feel like they're not being seen, make them feel like they're not being heard, make them feel like every avenue that they try to take is going to be blocked, and there's going to be a hurdle to overcome, and they're going to be pushed into the corner and have the rug pulled out from underneath of them and kick them on the ground over and over again. And that's what it feels like. It's been a very unstable situation. It's been very precarious. There's no stable ground to stand on right now. We don't even know how we're going to continue the Free Thought Project. And they want it that way. They want it intentionally that way. They don't want you to have a bedrock or a foundation to be able to grow on. So they're intentionally destabilizing the foundation. So I think it's important that we recognize that and continue forward. We persevere regardless, because if not, then they're going to win. And if we self-censor, they're going to win. So this is much more effective than we realize. And there's that meme that's gone around. It's like, well, how did they win the Revolutionary War? Well, it was like these pamphlets that they were passing around in these pubs, private, pre the war. They're passing on this information, getting people ideologically on the same page, aligned, trying to understand their opponent. That's what we're doing here. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to assess the situation. We're trying to educate ourselves to know how to defeat the propaganda, the intentional, orchestrated campaigns, psyops that they do and stuff. And by being educated, we could be that much better at combating it and staying on our feet and fighting back. And this is just as important as any other war. In fact, one last thing here before I shut up. I have this meme veteran hat that I wear all the time, right? And it's got the stripes or whatever. And sometimes I go out in public, I could go to Whole Foods and people will be like, thank you for your service, and I'll be like, people are so acclimated to constant wars that they think that I'm a veteran of some type of war overseas or something. They don't even bother to look at the like text or the writing or anything. They just think I'm some type of veteran, which is, it's crazy.
You technically are some type of veteran.
Right. But to me,
a war veteran.
And I know this is an outrageous statement and probably will get people to hate me, but I feel like our war that we're fighting online is much more significant and important than those wars, those arbitrary wars in Korea and Vietnam and all these other places where people are just going to die. This war that we're fighting here is ideological. We're trying to shape and change people's minds. We're trying to give them the tools, the information that they need to understand that the reality that they live in, and understand that, things aren't maybe all rainbows and kittens. And maybe we do need to get involved. Maybe we do need to step up to the plate and all get active. And however that looks like to you, whatever that may be, we all need to get involved and educate ourselves, most importantly. So, we need to evolve, and it's not going to be by voting and bringing in, new tyrants and new dictators. We have to evolve past this idea of authoritarianism. And I think there's a lot of great people out there that are working tirelessly every day to try to change that Overton window and advance past institutional violence.
Great points. And, that's the reason I'm doing the live stream right now. We have it's these different strategies to continue fighting what you mentioned as a fifth generation warfare is. So if you're watching this, look into fifth generation warfare so you can really understand the differences of, say, today and 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago in regards to fighting wars. If you see from 1,000 years ago to today, warfare has constantly continued to evolve. And, at this point in the global mindset, it seems like more people are realizing that on all sides, that it's probably more efficient to fight a war of information the way in this regards over, carpet bombing neighborhoods, which most states seem to have agreed upon. Most, not all yet.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and to be honest, there's a whole new type of warfare that's about to be rolled out as well. And if you don't mind taking a second to talk about this, and then I probably have to cut out because the kids are already, I don't know if you heard them jiggling the door and screaming out there.
Awesome.
But,
you know what? Let's we'll right now take our commercial break and perfect. Give a shout out to the sponsors of this video, which just so happens to be my company, Specker. Check out speckerhealth.com and get yourself some of the best health optimization products in the world today. And also check out the new Specker library where you can, look at that. Jason got his Specker products right over there. You can go to the Specker library at speckerhealth.com where you can learn about ingredients, health, and lifestyle, read summaries of scientific studies on all the ingredients we use on lifestyle. If you want to read studies on every ingredient used in that you can go on speckerhealth.com. And also you can take the new Specker Health Assessment at speckerhealth.com. Jason also has some awesome stuff.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, first of all, I did want to say Amir didn't put me up to this, guys. Like, I legit grabbed this before the interview because he's kind enough to, these have both been freebies. I do pay for the CBD, but these he's kind enough to kind of add on as some swag, extra perks. But all right, guys, here's the deal. Listen, my girlfriend, longtime girlfriend, has an apothecary, right? She makes her own products. She's been making chapstick forever. I have to kind of keep my voice down on this, but her chapstick's good. Don't get me wrong. It's nice. I like it, but I've been using this constantly every day since Amir gave it to me, and it's definitely my favorite. And if she heard me say that, she wouldn't be very happy. But so I don't know if you could get any better plug than that, but
that is one of the most humbling things I think I could hear. So I truly appreciate that, Jason. Seriously, thank you so much. I'm glad that you're enjoying the products too, and that it's helping you. That's what really brings value to me when I actually see the products that I formulate, directly helping the lives of my friends and family and just everybody in the world.
Sure. No, I know how passionate about it you are, man. I mean, we've hung out a few times now in real life, and I could see it. You exude it. Like you talk about it very passionately, and the CBD is great as well, guys. So definitely check that out. But the chapstick has the CBD in it. That's kind of the big difference between hers and this one. But I still like his better anyway. Anyway. So yeah, we're getting into generational warfare and
hey, whoa, no, Jason, you gotta tell the world a little bit about what you're doing as well with the books.
I am.
Yeah.
Sorry. On the table for it, for sure. Well, there was a great meme that just went around probably, I don't know, within the last 6 months or so. And it was listing, kind of showing, again, I'm a huge guy on imagery. So it was showing like the different stages of warfare over the years. In fact, here, I could probably bring it up just to be a little bit more accurate. But so it had like a stone, like that was the first form of warfare, people throwing rocks at each other. And then we evolved to spears, and we evolved to an arrow. Then we evolved to bullets and missiles, right? And then, of course, some people would even argue that the vaccine has been a weapon of war within the past few years. But now we have this new technology hitting the scene, and that technology is quite concerning. Something I've been keeping a very close eye on. And what I'm talking about here, guys, is CBDCs. I know I accidentally alluded to it earlier.
That was a nice transition you just did there. That was nice.
Sure. So CBDCs are certainly significant, guys. 131 different countries are now either piloting or actually implemented and using CBDCs. And basically what CBDCs are, they're central bank digital currencies. And I would assume that anybody who's watching this probably is familiar with the Federal Reserve, how nefarious of an organization that is, privately owned. Of course, they collude with government, and a big source of our financial woes right now with economic instability a lot of people are having with the endless printing of money. So basically, they want to do the same thing, but they want to digitalize our money. And that comes with a whole handful of, different issues and different problems, not only privacy issues, but we saw what happened last year in 2022, in February 2022 in Canada with the trucking protesters who had their bank accounts frozen simply for protesting the Canadian government. So this would basically make something like cash obsolete, and would basically be an on-off switch for the government. Now, I just put out a tweet today, and there's a lot of, financial institutions that are interested in this technology because it does kind of bring things up to speed in the digital era. I will give it that much. Of course, the central banks see it more as like a control mechanism, but there has been some politicians who have been pushing back, specifically Florida. Ron DeSantis wrote some legislation saying that they were going to ban CBDCs. They're not going to be able to be implemented in that state. And there's been a few other politicians who've also kind of put out there that they're concerned about CBDCs. But at the same time, their MasterCard is already doing these sandbox test trials for CBDCs, kind of building this digital public infrastructure for CBDCs. So on one hand, we have these huge, mega monolith corporations and banking institutions who are building the infrastructure for it. And then on the other hand, we have, our elected officials, a few of them, there's some that are calling for it, and there's some that are calling not for it, promising that they're going to put the brakes on it and not allow it. To me, it's basically like building the Death Star and promising that they're not going to be able to turn it on, or they're not going to turn it on, And so to me, it's extremely important. This is something that, along with paired up with the digital ID, could very much spell trouble for our liberty, for our children's liberty, and could eventually evolve towards something like what we're seeing in China with the social credit scores, especially if we add the 15-minute city element into the equation. So there's a lot of concerning technology that's kind of surfacing right now. And so because I've been following it so closely, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of not only where it's at, but how to fight back and how to prepare for it. So in September, on my birthday, early September, I actually published a book called 3 Ways to Prepare for CBDCs. and it's a relatively short read. It's around 60 pages or so. It's an ebook. I also included two video interviews with author and journalist Derek Brose and author and researcher Gavin Nascimento. And both these guys are absolutely genius, especially when it comes to these topics. So there's that added incentive. And then also it's for some people who just want to get the fuck out and see this as being like the next kind of huge potential for upending our lives. I also included a survival guide, like how to go off grid, how to find electricity, water, power. There's a bunch of information that I link to for basically just going off grid and doing it right and not half-assing it. Because as we've talked to experts, off-grid experts like Jack Spirko in our podcast, it's very easy to do that wrong. And a lot of people romanticize this idea of homesteading and going off grid, but there's a lot to it, guys. So I tried to.
There is a lot to it, y'all. Let me tell you from experience, it's not as rainbows and unicorns as y'all think. Let me tell you.
Sure, yeah, you live that, and that's where the time we spent together this year. You were living.
What a time! What a rough
way out there. And it was cool to see what the op that you had out there, but nonetheless, it's not easy. So there's that element, but the book covers a few different things. I tried to give the reader some elements of history. I tried to explain the origins of money. I tried to explain the modern applications. I explained where we're at right now with CBDCs. And as of right now, we still have at least a year, 2, 3, while they're still building this infrastructure. But it is now, right now is the time to act, guys. Not when shit hits the fan, not when there's a crisis, not when crypto's going through the roof and resources are scarce. Right now is the time to prepare. So I can't stress that enough. Definitely check it out. Go to jasonbassler.com. You'll see the book there, and I have a few other projects that I'm currently brewing up on the website, so you can check those out as well. But yeah, thanks for giving me a chance to speak about that. And I think it's one of the most important things that we could really be talking about right now.
Yeah, that is awesome. And you could also get it on Amazon too. Is that correct?
And on Amazon, that's correct. Yeah. I believe it's only the Kindle version, so you can't just straight up download the PDF. But if you do have a Kindle, check it out. And it's actually it's $5 cheaper on Amazon, just because it's a bigger audience over there. So if you want to support me out full-fledged, go to the jasonbassler.com if you're trying to save a few bucks. Or if you don't have a few bucks, that's
I would recommend jasonbassler.com over Amazon, because you'll get more money on that as well. So it's to support Jason.
Exactly.
That's actually like a thing always. If you see a company that has an Amazon product and then a direct product on their website, probably just go with the direct product, because you'll help that company a little more. Instead of helping Amazon a little more, right?
100%, man. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that book as well really soon. That's called 3 Ways to Prepare for CBDCs by Jason Bassler. So
it's written for beginners, guys. So it doesn't have to be like some expert. Like it really is geared for people who just like kind of heard the noise about this, but want to know more. So
awesome. So Jason, I have I'm just going to read just one of these. If you just want to give a one sentence to this question, what's your take on Israel and Palestine? Give me a quick take with the memes in regards to, because memes are doing quite the work right now.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting conversation, if you want to call it that. I mean, the mainstream has slanted it pretty heavily towards this Israel should have a right to defend itself kind of narrative. Unfortunately, anybody, most people are in this black and white thinking. If you're even vocal about Palestine and the suffering that's going on there with the 10,000 people who have been killed now, the innocent civilians, then that automatically makes you an anti-Semite or pro-Hamas. So I would just urge people to not get caught up in that black and white thinking. There's a hell of a lot more going on, especially if you look at the historical roots of the area. And more so, one of these entities actually has military capabilities. The other one is barely scrapping by, is very much the underdog. It doesn't have electricity, power, water, food. So this is hardly a war, hardly a fair fight. I don't want to slant it too much, but I think that is a safe assessment. I think that's a fair judgment. And obviously, what happened to the innocent people, the 1,300 people who were killed and slaughtered by Hamas, I could never, advocate or condone something like that.
We're finding that video that just recently came out with the IDF admitting that they opened fire on their own people. So
and there's a lot
even confirm how many the IDF friendly fire killed in that number that they're giving.
And even deeper than that, there's a lot more questions. I'm a little disappointed in the conspiracy community for not really digging in on this, but there's a lot more deeper elements to this that could point to it being an orchestrated event. Especially the fact that Egypt and the U.S., the CIA, both warned Israel beforehand. And, there's just so many elements. I mean, this was like the most highly innovative, border defense system anywhere on the planet. Has the best intelligence agency anywhere on the planet. There's so many elements and aspects of this that just seem suspicious and fishy. And now giving the Israeli government carte blanche to be very reckless. And I guess a lot of people have more or less forgiven and allowed Israel to kind of take the kid gloves off when it comes to responding to this situation, where it's like, hey, look, like civilians are going to die. That's just part of warfare. And that's even what Biden has said. And oddly enough, within the almost 2 years now of the Russia-Ukraine war, there's been about 9,700 casualties, innocent civilians who have died from that. Biden called that a genocide, but yet 10,000 people die in a little over a month, and Biden says that's just the cost of war. And the State Department, the White House are all kind of backing up this similar sentiment that this is just one of the elements that happens within war. So the fact that they're so blatant about the double standards, it's like almost like they're asking us to pretend to play along and not to trust your own eyes. And I guess that's the final command, as Orwell says. So,
the whole "don't trust your own eyes" is a standard they seem to be using a lot more and more and more. So to finish off and transition from there, if you, as a longtime meme maker who's had success in memeing, if somebody is memeing or wants to get into memeing and get involved in freeing the world, what would you recommend? Now, the reason I ask this is because when we were bringing up censorship a little earlier, like for example, I got hit the hardest when I made a meme that talked about sudden infant death syndrome and sudden adult death syndrome. In retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have used those exact words. Because if I didn't use those exact keywords and I figured out something else, they might not have hit me as hard as they did, for example. So do you have any recommendations for people to be as efficient as possible in their memeing?
Oh shit, your battery's exhausted, man.
It will unexhaust by the time I am done speaking this sentence right now. So
to answer your question, I think, you made a point. We need to be smart. We need to be one step ahead as to how we present the information. I think that's important. But what I was saying a few minutes ago, we also need to be sure we're not self-censoring, right? So walk that line very diligently. And it's not going to do us anybody any good if you're spending time making content that nobody sees. And unfortunately, that's kind of their goal right now. There are ways of getting around some of the wording and language if you can't necessarily get past a certain phrase that you think is going to be the most effective in conveying your message. You can always cross it out or put a few dots over the actual font or the word itself. And sometimes that throws off the algorithms and AI enough that it kind of works as a deterrence. Otherwise, if you're just kind of breaking into the world of meme making, I would say just kind of keep in mind that this is planting a seed, right? You're not trying to necessarily give people that tree of knowledge. You're just trying to give them that opportunity to plant a seed in their head. And if they have the integrity, if they have the effort and the energy to invest, they will grow that tree of knowledge themselves. Don't necessarily go for the low hanging fruit though, right? There's been too many times I feel like where they'll find a certain narrative that is kind of cherry picking a certain bias for their echo chamber. And of course, this is my own subjective preference, so I can't tell people how to live their lives, but authenticity repeated is how you build trust. Show your audience over and over again that you're authentic, that you're trustworthy. You're not going to do that by focusing on and kind of harvesting the low-hanging fruit. Those are the memes that you'll see a dime a dozen of about certain topics that maybe are, I don't know. There's a ton of them. Try to be a little different. Try to think outside of the mainstream. Even within our own community, there seems to be kind of a harmonization of certain types of content. And I guess maybe the meme templates have play a certain role in that. And don't get me wrong, the meme templates can be effective, and it seems kind of where the meme community has gone. But don't get so caught up in them that you're like deterring your own message, or trying to frame it or sculpt it in a way that only works for resonating with that community, I guess. So, and yeah, man, I think that's basically it. It's an art form, it really is. And it takes practice. The images are so important. The wording is so important. The fonts even are so important to a certain degree. And then there's also people who shit post, and then they get, so it's funny how this works. It can be an art form, and it can just be like you happen to articulate this idea that everybody's feeling, but they haven't quite said it themselves. And you just hit the nail on the head. And it's like, oh shit, here's this image with a few words, and it goes mega viral. Sometimes you have to give it a little more legs by adding the right imagery and stuff. So it's certainly an interesting phenomenon. And in some ways, and I guess in a lot of ways, like we're the pioneers of this movement of this world. So it is kind of fun to ride that wave.
And that's why we're talking about this today. I don't really hear people discussing these topics that we've been talking about today. I mean, there really aren't that many people. The numbers are growing over the last few years, I see. But say, 10 years ago, the volume wasn't as high as it is now, to where just so many people that I say back then it was very community based. Now it's kind of spread outside of niche community,
Sure.
to where if you said the word meme over 10 years ago, a lot of people would say, what's that? You know?
Most definitely. Well, it's turned into like an adult version of like our comics, like we used to read comics when we were kids. And so in some ways, I mean, they could be amusing, they could be educational. There's so many elements to them and so much utility, so and then there's the shit post where it could just be a smattering of array of different ideas or concepts, and you don't put any effort into any of it, and some of it catches and some of it doesn't. And I think that's probably more of a newer phenomenon in itself too. But yeah, man, it's a very interesting subculture. But you're right, it is growing, and it's more a staple of the internet now than anything else.
Indeed, yes, a staple of the internet, and a staple that clearly moved outside of the internet and now is in everybody's real lives, whether it's your parents or even grandparents, or it's spread all throughout society. And it's why? Well, because it works. It works, and it's not gonna spread throughout the market in such a popular way. So that all being said, Jason, thank you so much for joining me today and discussing this topic. If you're watching and you want to learn more about Jason Bassler, I will have his information in the description of this video. Also, you can check out jasonbassler.com and also the freethoughtproject.com, where you can check out Free Thought Project and also the Project podcast. Jason interviews some epic guests that, again, it's guests that you don't really find too often on other podcasts. So if you're looking for really unique information on a lot of these topics we've been talking about and more, you could check that out. And also Free Thought Project all across social media as well, right?
I think that pretty much covers it, man. Yeah, thank you so much. It was fun, and this is obviously a topic that I could talk about for hours and hours.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like this video. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you thought about this. Let me know what you want to hear about in the future. And Jason, thank you again so much. I appreciate you. And if you're watching this right now, make sure to go outside, go be healthy, go spend more time in nature than you do under artificial light, and do everything possible in your daily life to push yourself to health and wealth. I love you all. Peace and love. I'll see you soon. All right.